It is Friday, October 4th. Let's talk PlayStation. Yet another very busy week for PlayStation. There's so much going on. We have a lot to cover. So first, our October PS Plus games. As a reminder, The Last of Us Remastered, MLB The Show 2019. If you have not played The Last of Us yet, you have no excuse. Grab it. At least try it. Now, I want to remind everybody real quick, we had a big PS5 rumor from Gizmodo. They posted an article about some pretty interesting insider information that they were given, and so we did a separate video just to be timely, and I didn't want this episode to be way too long anyway, so for everybody that shows up just on Fridays to watch these, go to my channel, and it's the video right before this one to get caught up on PS5 stuff. Now, our first actual news story, on Monday, if you didn't see, but the Sony Interactive Entertainment chairman of Worldwide Studios, Shawn Layden, left the company in a very interesting way. So on Monday, on the PlayStation main Twitter account, this tweet was sent out saying, "It is with great emotion that we announce the Worldwide Studios chairman, Shawn Layden, will be departing SIE. His visionary leadership will be greatly missed. We wish him success in future endeavors and are deeply grateful for his years of service. Thanks for everything, Shawn." And that's all we got. There was no press releases. Well, there was one in Japan, and that one kind of got muddled. People thought it was a retirement letter or a retirement notion, and that wasn't true because of mixed translation. You need a native speaker to understand. It doesn't necessarily mean retirement, so it's not retirement. We got one Japanese press release and nothing out of Shawn Layden, nothing from his Twitter accounts, nothing on his LinkedIn as of recording this right now, so we don't necessarily know what happened there. It's definitely a bit weird. Obviously, the tweet is on a good note, but this leaves a little bit of, wondering what's really going on here. Now, here's the thing. Shawn Layden has been with PlayStation for such a long time. When this was announced on Monday, I tweeted out, we didn't get to see that much of him. He's been in the limelight for the past 4, maybe a little longer than that, 4 years. But he's been with PlayStation for over 30 years. So he's, this is kind of a big deal for him actually leaving, and it just seems like it's with such little fanfare for somebody who's been with the company for so long and has been so vital to the success of PlayStation, behind the scenes and now in front of the scenes. So I don't know. Keep in mind the guy's up there in age. I think he's 58, and this goes along with so many other departures at SIE and back when it was even Sony Computer Entertainment. We've lost Andrew House. He was with the company for so long. Jack Tretton, Kaz Hirai retired. Now here's the thing. A lot of these guys, they're all up there in age. So Andrew House, he just recently joined an advisory board. Jack Tretton's doing consultant work. Kaz retired. So a lot of these, senior high-level people that are leaving Sony, they're really just kind of taking it easy. And so I would have to guess Shawn's in the same scenario. I don't think there's really a discussion of him going to competition like at Stadia or something. Stadia's, poaching so many people out of the games industry. So sure, that's a possibility. But I'm thinking maybe this was on his own accord. I don't really know what else to say because I feel like it can go in any direction in all honesty. But he's up there in age, so that's my initial gut reaction, despite how weird his departure is. Now, one thing that we do know for sure, and that's our next news story, is Atsushi Morita. Now, he was the president of Sony Interactive Entertainment Japan and Asia, and he was also the director of, I forget the specific title of that, but he actually retired. So he was at age 60, and that's an official announcement pressed out from Sony that it was a retirement thing. That's typical with Japanese companies and Japanese workers that get up to that age. It's quite common, so there's nothing left up to interpretation there, nothing to speculate about. Now, in the midst of these departures, there's one article that came out from GameDaily.biz suggesting that there's a bit of restructuring going on with Sony in terms of them going completely global and focusing all their separate entities at Sony Interactive Entertainment into kind of one strong arm, even though it's still obviously separated by territory. And this article goes on to claim about how there's a power struggle between current Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO Jim Ryan to Shawn Layden, and they have a source suggesting that they're from a developer saying that we don't know what's going on with this transition for next gen. We're not being told much of anything. The thing is, I'm not trying to completely write off this article, but reading it doesn't seem to carry a whole lot of weight. The very beginning portion of it seems to make a bunch of claims as if they're fact, which isn't really accurate. We haven't really heard much of a power struggle at Sony, to be honest. And you would know coming from me, I've been covering PlayStation news every Friday for 7 goddamn years. We haven't really heard anything credible like that. And then they bring in their source saying, we haven't heard much about the next generation transition compared to previous situations. I can't confirm or deny that, of course. In fact, a big portion of console transition, a lot of it's in secrecy. The internal teams are told everything first. Second party might get spoon-fed some information, and third parties, of course, won't find out nearly as much information as internal teams, because obviously secrecy and trust is a big part of that process. So to me, the article just doesn't seem completely accurate or believable. Now, going into our next news story, PlayStation Now, we've been waiting for this. I even predicted this at the start of this year, that Sony needs to get more aggressive if they really want this thing to make sense for people, and here it is. So PlayStation Now, Sony cut prices across the board for all territories. For example, in the US, $10 a month for PlayStation Now, or $25 for 3 months, or $60 for the whole year. This is down from $100 for the year, or from $20 a month. So pretty much close to 50% in most scenarios, and again, it's the same for other territories. I'll list all the prices. The other thing is that they're adding recent titles, more blockbuster games out of the PS4 library. So, for example, God of War, Uncharted 4, Grand Theft Auto 5 is in there now. And these are going to be on a rolling basis, which is new for PlayStation Now. So before, PlayStation Now has been up to about an 800 game library over, including PS2, PS3, and PS4. Now we've got titles that will be circulating in and out. So these titles that I announced will be leaving the service January 2nd, I think is what they said. And then thereafter, every single month, titles will be coming back in and back out. Just some of the premium, more recent titles, but you'll still have that 800 plus library of legacy PS4, PS3, and PS2 games. The other thing that wasn't really talked about too much, but you don't need PS Plus to play the games in PlayStation Now online. So you still need PS Plus to play, the latest game that comes out that's obviously not on PS Now. But if you're playing a game on PlayStation Now that, has a multiplayer mode and you don't have Plus, you can play that game with a PS Now subscription. It's basically all-inclusive. You don't have to worry about having Plus to play anything on PlayStation Now. So that's good. This is great, a good step in the right direction. Honestly, considering this video is already going to get pretty long, I know, I think what we'll do for Tuesday's video is probably a rant's going to be incoming. I'm seeing, ever since this news dropped, big discussion about PlayStation Now versus Game Pass, which is low-key kind of like frustrating me. Like, so many people are comparing the two, and it's not really like that. They're not that interchangeable, in all honesty. They're going for two different things. There's two different strategies between both these companies, and really the argument is going to be Now versus xCloud. I see where people are coming from when they say, oh, now you can download PlayStation Now games. It's been like that for a little bit now with PS4 titles, and so that's where the comparisons are coming from, but it's not, I don't know. I wish more people played to the fact that these services are inherently much more different than they're really discussed about. So I think we'll do that Tuesday, and that will be semi kind of a rant topic, I'm sure. But to close out this news story, PlayStation Now absolutely needed this. If you remember, I did a PS Now video testing the streaming capabilities of the service on a slow and fast internet speed, and even on the high end, it wasn't all that good. That's still the case for many consumers. That's why people are so reluctant to stream their games. I don't blame them. I'm right there with you until it feels like local play, where the latency is extremely low and the resolution is stable and it doesn't drop on you. That's what will be widely adopted. But in that video, I said, the downloading feature is what saves it, to make it to actually have local play. And it's a good short term for Sony to say, hey, here's 300 plus PS4 games, download these, and then try to enjoy or check out the streaming portion, hang on to the subscription to enjoy the PS4 stuff until the streaming gets a little bit better. I think that makes the most sense, and it's a good way to get people into it, to try it, because that's like the overarching issue is that nobody's going to pay for something that they can't really experience firsthand. Even though there's a connection test on PSN, it's not going to show you what it's really like to stream your games. So it's a good short term for Sony, and the price is even better. Back then I said you can't really argue the price at 300 plus games at $20 a month. At a certain point, it's not subjective, like it's objective. You can't beat how good of a deal that is, and now that's cut in half. And at a full year subscription of $60, you'd be hard pressed to say that PlayStation Now is like a bad deal or a bad service. If you're just jumping in for the PS4 stuff, I think you're going to be way ahead. Now moving on, Wired.com posted an article about the PlayStation Now price drop, and they spoke to Jim Ryan about it. And we got probably my favorite quotes I've ever seen out of Jim Ryan. So this is what he said to Wired. The track record of the incumbent platform winning the next time around is not a great one. So the major thrust of my executive energy is to avoid complacency. What he's basically saying is that it's no guarantee that because we won this generation that we're going to win the next. reflecting on the history of consoles, and certainly he's been with Sony for so long. He's kind of talking about the PS3 as well, when it had a really tough go at launch in 2006. The company is slowly rebuilding it and making it better, and kind of downplaying their competition back to the time of Xbox 360. And he's saying that we're not going to get complacent. We're not going to act like we're going to be fine in the next generation. That's awesome. Out of all this weird and polarizing things he's said in the past 5 or 6 years, this is my favorite. And I instills a lot more confidence in me as we go through a lot of this restructuring and people leaving Sony, because this big corporate turnover in the PS4 generation, it is significant, and it does mean something. Leadership's very important, and when you have a lot of these guys that made PS4 so great leave the company, yeah, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that have been with the company for 15, 20, 30 years as well that we don't see because they're not at press conferences, they're not in the, they're not talking to websites. It's easy to get worried, but this, I love the reassurance of, hey, we're not going to stay still, and we will make PlayStation better. Now, in that same article, Wired also put out that Crossplay has officially exited beta. So if you remember, Sony was against Crossplay, then they were open to it, then it came in form of a beta with Fortnite being the first game. A few titles came in finally, but now it has been confirmed that it's out of beta, which I still find so silly and weird that Sony did that, but out of beta. So this would mean that, and I would presume that developers, if they want crossplay, they don't have to jump through some hoops or present a case to Sony or whatever the condition was in the beta phase. Now they can just say, hey, we're doing crossplay. It's part of the SDK, it's part of the certification process or whatever, and it's just something that if a developer plans to do it, it's done, and they don't have to deal with any roadblocks. So that's good news, and now we don't really have to talk about it anymore unless something else comes up in regards to Sony being the problem. Moving on, we've got 2 new patent registrations to talk about. We haven't discussed patents in a while, but we've got 2 new ones. The first one being a 3D holographic display, and what's notable here is that the applicant is Sony Interactive Entertainment. Sometimes with these things, it's Sony Corporation, and it's much more speculative that, hey, maybe this is for PlayStation because the category is video games, and usually that is the case, but no, this is under Sony Interactive Entertainment. And this patent describes a 3D display, well, projecting a holographic image. So it's using a bunch of mirrors to bounce light around. It is allowing multiple players to be able to see this image from different angles, from what it seems. Really fascinating. There's not much we can really say beyond that. It's your typical run-of-the-mill fancy patent that describes something really kind of out there. Very exciting tech, certainly, but this would, if this in any way, shape, or form came to consumer retail, sounds expensive. And the thing that we can always say here is, well, this doesn't guarantee anything. Sony has thousands of patents, and then 1%, 5% of them actually end up coming out to retail as a product that you can buy. So who knows? You could certainly think that maybe this is for PlayStation 5 or something that they're exploring even really long term beyond PlayStation 5 to 6 or 7 if they still stick with a typical naming nomenclature. So it could be interesting technology, but that remains to be seen. The next patent is for a virtual assistant app on your phone to be a companion to playing games on your PS4 or newer hardware. It's basically one of those virtual assistants like what you've seen on mobile banking apps or like cash apps, and it's used elsewhere, but you could like talk to it and say, hey, where is this? And then the app will respond back, oh, this is where something is. So they use Horizon and Skyrim as examples where you could say, where's this health replenishment, and it would put it in the game, so there's communication between the app and the game. This seems very, I don't know, I guess gimmicky would be the right word here. It almost reminds me of, if you remember back in the 90s, like PlayStation games and other games would have like a help hotline on it, and they would charge by the minute. It was a 900 number, and you would call and you get charged by the minute to have somebody on the phone tell you how to play the game or how to beat this boss or go do this and that. It almost feels like that, except for the modern era. Seems silly, seems weird. We're in the advent of YouTube and plenty of guides online, so I don't know, it seems really like a waste of resources. But anyway, moving on to The Last of Us Part 2. We've got a big news dump here, a lot of great details. Ever since the media event, Naughty Dog's finally being more vocal about the game and telling us a little bit more about it. So the first one we've got is, the reason why those animations are so fluid and so impressive and so real is because of a new technique that Naughty Dog is using. So the way that it was described previously is usually you would pick an animation, and that would be the animation that would play out for running or moving left or moving right. What Naughty Dog is describing this new system is that it's a system in place that takes hundreds of animations, layers them together, and cherry picks each individual part out of what works best for the situation that you're in. So if you're in a dynamic place where you move slightly to the left and up a wall, it carries all these animations and splices them into something that looks much more natural, and that's how this look is achieved and why it looks so impressive. I love when things like this are really discussed in a finer detail and explained to people, because it does look really impressive, and it does get to a point where you think, my god, is that real? This looks really scripted. And it's great to hear that this might really be what you experience when you play the game for yourself. Now, for those curious about Joel's involvement in the game, Naughty Dog has confirmed that, yeah, he's definitely a big role in the game. They've said that the relationship between Ellie and Joel is still strained, and that's certainly referencing the events from the first game. And so that's good. Not much more that needs to be said there, I think. Just if you were the kind of person that was theorizing Joel's dead or something like that, that seems to be out the door. So unless there is some sort of massive U-turn, again, like typical Naughty Dog fashion. The other news is that PS4, the standard PS4, is what Naughty Dog is running the game on, and it's the baseline system, and they're not running the game off PS4 Pro and downscaling it. So that's good to hear. You know, I would be more interested to find out how many developers are actually targeting X1 X and PS4 Pro and then scaling back to PS4 and Xbox One. I'd be fascinated to see if that is, like, if the whole industry's kind of turned over to the mid-cycle consoles as the baseline platforms, and then they scale down and up accordingly with PC and base consoles, or if it's still a situation where a majority of the industry is still on base consoles. It wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if a lot of developers are targeting X1 X and PS4 Pro, because you would have good faith that they would properly scale down and up to where the game runs properly on the base systems. Of course, that's been a pretty mixed bag the past few games that we've had. So, but a lot of that time, it's just developers trying to hit their deadlines, and then they always think in the back of their heads, you know, we've got to get this game out, we'll get it out, and then we push patches out afterwards. It's a somewhat unhealthy theme that we've been seeing a lot lately, but that is where we're at right now. Now, if you remember the one big detail that came out with the enemies in the game and how they have names for each other, and that's a very big emphasis on them, you know, yelling out like, oh no, Dale, or whatever when people die. Looks like Naughty Dog's got a pretty big emphasis on audio in this game, because obviously that's audio, but the other thing that we learned is that every character has a heartbeat kind of in the background, and the heartbeat, as it goes up for running, sprinting, melee, even entering an area with a lot of enemies, Ellie's heartbeat will advance up. But as you're hearing this, you're hearing her cough or, you know, pant, and that's the same with the enemies. So if you are taking cover and somebody's running towards you, you'll not only be able to hear them, you know, sprinting through the grass, but you'll be hearing them kind of, you know, breathe quite heavily as well. And so they're also making a case for how that's actually a big part of the game. It's something that not a lot of people may have noticed, and so they're making that a point as well. I think they spent a lot of time on the background inner workings of the audio and how it plays out, especially because it's all based on proximity. A lot of this is based on proximity, of course. So I am really loving the amount of detail that we're getting out of this game. And the thing is, you already know that when the game comes out, there's probably going to be a lot more things that players will pick up on themselves that wasn't initially talked about or revealed in interviews. This happened with the first game, actually. There's a lot of videos that highlight the finer details that you may not have even noticed about the first game. Now, our next news story is about the Uncharted movie. It's got another new director. If you remember, we lost Dan Trachtenberg not that long ago. Well, now we've got Travis Knight. Travis Knight directed the Transformers Bumblebee movie, I think, and then he used to be an animator on a bunch of other movies. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I'm not a movie guy. But the movie's still slated to come out in December of 2020. So we just got another new director. I'd imagine there's still a lot of other people that they have to get going. If this movie has to enter principal photography like soon, I would think, because obviously post-production takes longer than principal photography. So you're gonna need like a month and a half, 2 months, maybe 2 months and a half for principal photography, and then you're gonna do what, 5 months of editing? I mean, do you see what I'm saying? We're kind of losing our time here. This movie's clearly gonna get pushed back even further. Also, it's been a long-standing rumor that we'll be getting a Demon's Souls remaster at some point. The last we heard was Jason Schreier casually saying yes to a fan asking, are we gonna get a Demon's Souls remaster? Which could be a situation where he's just, it's his opinion that yes, we should get one, or yes, he knows that we're getting one, and that's him saying that yes, Demon's Souls is coming. The other thing that happened this week is on the Sacred Symbols podcast, it's Colin Moriarty's podcast. When discussing the state of play, he said, I thought they were going to announce it there. He said the soul still burns on that remaster. He wasn't referring to Demon Souls specifically. His hint was the souls still burn, which actually is like a Soul Calibur reference, I believe. He's got connections in the industry. He said before he does know of one unannounced exclusive. I would imagine it's that. He's not referring to Soul Calibur in that comment that he made, so probably we are getting Demon Souls at some point. It's just a matter of when, because he's now thoroughly surprised that we still haven't had it being public yet. But now we can get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PSN code, and I'd like to congratulate Corey Richards. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. Now, if you would like to win, we do this every single week here. Follow that link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and the winner will be announced next week. I'm trying to help you pay for these pre-orders that we got going on, man. Last of Us Part 2, Death Stranding. A lot of good stuff coming, as I'm sure you're all well aware of. Now, those are all the news stories I want to talk about, you guys. On Tuesday, we did a PlayStation Plus discussion about how the games are actually getting better, but there's still a bit of an issue, and so we can see a middle ground to where Sony could possibly explore and make it a little bit better. So check that conversation out, and like I mentioned earlier, the PS5 rumor was on Wednesday, so if you want to stay up to date with the PS5 stuff, you have to dial back one video behind this one and watch that. Tuesday, I think we will do a discussion about PS Now versus Game Pass. I think there's a lot that needs to be said, and I'm seeing like nobody really talk about it at all. So we'll probably do that. And follow on Twitter at Mystic Ryan. As some of you are well aware, very busy for the month of October, so we may actually be doing some live streams finally, which is really rare for me, but that's twitch.tv/MysticRB if you want to head over there and follow, and it will certainly be impromptu, no schedule, of course. Too busy, but you know, we'll try and get some streams in finally, which will be good, because that's, yeah, I don't do that all that often. And that's it. This cat is sleeping on the bed. She's looking really comfy, and I want to edit this and look like what she's doing right now. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan, but I can thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.